The villains in the newer Gears of War games, the Swarm. After 2 installments in Gears 4 and 5, they've yet to make a huge mark on the story and on fans as a credible, worthy and interesting faction. They are not on the level of the iconic Locust Horde and even the Lambent as of now, but maybe they could be if some of the points in this video are implemented. As always, I'm your host Abz, and here is how to improve the Swarm in Gears 6. A High General. The Swarm could do with a big, bad Swarm General, Prophet or someone similar to pose a monstrous threat to the players. You see the foot soldiers of the Swarm, as well as the Swarm creatures like the Snatchers, but no creature really stands head and shoulders above the rest. Apart from a Warden, but they still aren't the ultimate threat. So a Supreme General, who is even more overpowered than a Warden, would be badass. Or what if Queen Reyna summoned a group of mini-bosses, or an elite squad that you take on throughout the game, similar to what Halo Infinite did? They would mercilessly track you down, and at times you will have no choice but to face their wrath. A signature identity. With the Swarm drones and Scions, their personality and words are just copied off the Locust really, adding nothing of value, nothing that we've not already seen. This needs to change. They need to have more of a personality, show what the Swarm are like between themselves, how they treat each other. Do the Wardens punish the drones if they fail to complete any tasks, or even showing cutscenes of how they're building their army and so on. There's a lot to explore here, and they also need more signature weaponry, just like the Claw and Breaker Mace, and not just rely on limited resources from their predecessors. A Hierarchical Structure. With the Locust Horde, there was a set hierarchical structure, showcasing how the Locust weren't mindless monsters, but a sophisticated war machine, whose generals were considered geniuses on the battlefield. But not just that, the drones had different subclasses, all of which had a different purpose and speciality. The Therons were the elites, and there were subclasses within the Therons. There were Locust captains like Jamad, so there were many layers to the Locust's military, but the Swarm drones are all just kinda plain. None of the Swarm drones really stand out, so it gets a bit confusing. The Scions are their leaders, the Wardens are awesome and they are also leaders, but apart from that you don't really see much. So I think they should give the Swarm more of a sophisticated military structure in Gears 6. No more Swarm DeeBee robots. Get rid of the boring and lazy DeeBee Swarm variations, and if they do want to still use this concept, then I would suggest repurposing this concept into Swarm DeeBee vehicles and technology. This is because they don't really have tamed hollow creatures like the Locust did, apart from the Swarmac, which is just a rip-off. The Swarm are scavengers, so making use of DeeBee tech to create their own weapons and infrastructure would be interesting. Obviously they need a way to get around, so this could be one way to go about it, instead of throwing in so many robotic enemies, which should not be in a Gears of War game. More enemy variety. The Swarm's enemy variety isn't too bad since you have the drones, Scions, Wardens in terms of humanoids, and then creatures such as Pouncers, Snatchers, Carriers, the Flock, and so on, but it could definitely be a lot better. As the Swarm War progresses, there should be more Swarm enemies that enter the battlefield. How about more melee based brawler enemies who flush you out of cover? That would be really fun. Or what if the Flock was able to band together and form certain creatures, similar to how the Let Golo worms in Halo would become the Mallet Golo, or more commonly known as the Hunters. More returning hollow creatures wouldn't be the worst idea, but they'd have to be heavily mutated and very different to the OG versions, otherwise it's just a copy and paste job, such as returning Bloodmounts, who are now heavily mutated after the events of the emotion countermeasure weapon. So more enemy variety for the Swarm is a must. Change of art style. Overall, I don't really like the art style for the Swarm, or even generally for the newer Gears games. It's more cartoony compared to the originals. It makes the Swarm look less serious than they actually are. I would love a more realistic art style for the Swarm, to make them look a lot more menacing and bloodthirsty. Lore explanations. So as the original trilogy progressed, we learnt more and more about the Locust, mainly in Gears 2 where we fought in the Hollow, learning more of the Locust's tactics, their brutality such as the torturing of prisoners, their religion, artifacts and so on. But for the Swarm, apart from the capturing of humans by Snatchers, placing them in swarm pods, turning them into juvies, then imagos, and the hives where they're all interconnected, A lot of the Swarm lore is still a mystery, with so many unanswered questions. Where did the Snatchers and Carriers even come from? Do the Swarm drones and creatures share the same religion as the Locust? How have the Flock been able to hack DeeBee robots anyway? What about the Kraken from Gears 5? How did this gargantuan creature randomly just come about? And how did the Swarm manipulate it? What about the Hive Beast from Gears 4? Do they only appear in certain hives or what? And do the Swarm have a nexus similar to the Locust? So I think there's quite a bit of work to be done on the lore of the Swarm as well, tying it all together and adding a lot more depth to the Swarm in Gear 6 as a must too, in my opinion. The Coalition can do so much better with the Swarm, and I hope in Gear 6 they can turn it around with this faction. The Swarm aren't as iconic as the Locust, and they may never live up to that, but they can definitely be a great villain faction in Gear 6 and beyond. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more similar content like this, and a big special thank you to the YouTube and Patreon members for your additional support. I really do appreciate all of you. I'm your host Abz, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.